The station squatted on the edge of the world, a splintered ghost of timber and rusted rail ties, where the wind seemed to blow only sorrow. Clara May stepped off the last carriage with a limp and a prayer she no longer believed in. Dust rose, to meet her like it recognized one of its own tired, used up, and not long for this world. She hit the platform hard. Knees first, then elbows. Her face scraped the warped planks with a hiss of pain, but she didn't cry out. She didn't even try to get up. People passed. Not many, but enough. No one stopped. A station master with a crooked hat and one dead eye glanced over, frowned as if her presence inconvenienced his view, and turned back to his paper. A woman in a bonnet clutched her child and quickened her pace. Two ranch hands laughed about something and walked right past her collapsed figure. She didn't blame them. If she were them, she wouldn't stop for her either. Her breath wheezed against her ribs, cracked maybe, or just bruised badly enough to pretend. Her left eye was nearly swollen shut, and a crust of dry blood traced her cheekbone like a mocking trail. She tried to curl in tighter, but the fabric of her skirt had torn at the knee, and cold wind found every cut and bruise. She didn't remember buying the ticket, didn't remember boarding, just remembered running. Back there where the bruises began and her name ended, someone had sold her like livestock, like meat. She'd been branded, not with iron, but with betrayal. And every step since had been. Soaked in her own shadow, a boot heel clicked near her ear. She flinched out another. Closer. She tried to move, to gather what pride she had left, but her body refused. Her limbs belonged to the wind now. Then the voice came quiet low, like the roll of distant thunder. "You breathing?" She didn't answer. Couldn't. Her throat was parched like scorched earth. Her voice lost somewhere in the dust. The boots shifted. A scrape. A pause. Then Armstrong, careful, scooped her off the platform like she weighed nothing. She gasped, flailing instinctively, fists weakly hitting the chest she'd landed against. "Easy?" the voice said again, calm but firm. "Ain't gonna hurt you." He smelled of horse, sweat, and pine. She hated that it comforted her. He carried her past the station, past the rusted rail and the half-dead telegraph pole, to a hitching post where a dun horse waited patiently. She twisted her head, trying to see him. The sun was in her eyes. Or maybe it was blood, or tears. She wasn't sure. "Why?" she rasped. "Why are you helping me?" He didn't answer right away. He settled her onto the horse, like a father, with a fevered child, then mounted. Up behind her with a fluid grace that came from years in the saddle. "Wouldn't feel right leaving someone in the dirt," he said finally. "Not today." He didn't explain what was special about today. That she didn't ask. That the horse began to move, slow at first, then trotting, each hoofbeat sending pain lancing through her ribs. She winced, biting down hard on the inside of her cheek. Blood bloomed copper on her tongue. Better that than tears. The town fell behind them, small and distant and forgettable, like all the towns she'd passed through since her world ended. She didn't ask where they were going. It didn't matter. She was used to not having choices, but the silence between them didn't press heavy like all the others. It sat beside her like an old dog-worn, familiar patient. Her rescuer didn't speak, didn't press, didn't even look at her as far as she could tell. Just guided the horse with a steady hand and let the prairie roll beneath them. About an hour passed, maybe two. She drifted in and out. Pain had a way of warping time. When the cabin appeared tucked between two leaning pines on a rise, above a shallow creek, Clara thought it was a mirage, a trick of need. But the horse stopped, and she felt herself being lifted again, cradled like something precious. "Hang on," he murmured. She clung to consciousness just long enough to catch a glimpse of a porch, a rocking chair frozen mid-sway. By wind, a chipped lantern swinging above the door. Inside smelled of tobacco and something meaty, though the fire had long since died down. He laid her gently on a worn leather couch, propped her head with a saddlebag, and disappeared into another room. Clara tried to sit up. Her body screamed. She gave up. He returned with a basin, a cloth, and a bottle of something that smelled like it could kill a man in one gulp. He dipped the cloth and knelt beside her. "This is going to sting." She nodded. He pressed the cloth to her temple. She didn't scream, but her eyes watered. "Name's Wade," he said after a while, like it might matter. She didn't answer. Not right away. He cleaned her wounds with practiced hands. Not gentle, but not cruel either. Just efficient. Like someone who'd done this before. For the first time, she really looked at him. Mid-30s maybe, though the creases around his eyes made him look older. Hair dark, jaw unshaven, eyes the color of a coming storm. Not handsome in a storybook way, but in a way that made you stop walking. "Clara," she whispered. He nodded. Didn't smile. He offered her a tin cup. She drank. It burned going down, but the warmth spread fast. Her hands stopped shaking. "How far?" He asked. She blinked. "From wherever you ran." She looked away. "Far enough." Wade didn't press. The fire crackled to life again. He must have lit it while she was blinking back memories. Outside, the wind had picked up. The shutters groaned. Coyotes yipped in the distance. "Anyone follow?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. Her voice cracked like thin ice. "I stopped looking back 3 towns ago." He stood, went to the window, pulled the curtain aside, just a sliver. Nothing but darkness. "Anyone comes," he said, "they'll find me waitin'." Clara stared at the ceiling. Wood beamed. Dust in every groove. Safe. For now. "You got a wife?" she asked, before she could think better of it. Wade didn't answer for a long moment. When he did, it was with a voice hollow as the plains. "Had?" She didn't ask more. Silence returned. Not cold this time. Companionable. Or maybe just exhausted. Clara let her eyes drift shut. Her last thought before. Sleep dragged her under was strange and unwelcome. Maybe the station wasn't the end after all. Maybe it was where things started again. But hope was a dangerous thing. She wouldn't let herself feel it yet. Not just yet. The fire crackled, the wind howled, and the woman too bruised to stand slept in the home of a man who'd once been broken. 2. Neither of them knew what came next. But for the first time in too long, neither of them was alone. And that was something. ChatGPT said, the sound of a ladle scraping the bottom of an iron pot pulled Clara from sleep. Her eyes opened slowly, unwillingly, meeting the slanted ceiling of a stranger's home. Wooden beams overhead were rough-hewn, darkened with age and smoke. It smelled of wood fire, faint tobacco, and something stewing onions, beans, maybe meat. The warmth of the room wrapped around her sore limbs like a reluctant embrace. She sat up too fast. Pain shot through her ribs and side, and she bit back a gasp. A blanket, woolen and worn but clean, had been laid across her. A folded shirt served as a pillow. Her boots had been removed and stood neatly near the couch. A single thought pushed its way to the front of her mind. Where the hell am I? She turned her head. The cabin was small, functional. Table and 2. Chairs near a stone hearth. Shelves stacked with canned goods and a rifle leaning in the corner. A saddlebag rested on a hook by the door, and her torn, dust-caked skirt hung over a chair to dry. Her legs were wrapped in one of his shirt stew. Big, rolled up at the knees, buttoned clumsily. A bandage circled her right thigh. Another, tighter one hugged her side. That was when she heard him. Wade stood at the wood-burning stove, his back turned. He stirred the pot with one hand, the other resting at his side, still. No movement wasted. No fidgeting. A man used to silence. She cleared her throat. He didn't turn. Just said, "Food's almost ready. You can eat if you think you're up to it." His voice was low, even, not unkind, but not soft either. Clara shifted her legs over the side of the couch and tried to stand. "You'll want to go slow," he added, without looking. She ignored him. She hated taking advice, especially from men. Her legs buckled before she was fully upright. She grunted, cursing under her breath, catching the armrest just in time. Wade finally turned, his eyes scanning her, but never lingering. Just enough to make sure she was upright. "I told you," he said simply. She hated that he didn't gloat. He brought the pot to the table and ladled the contents into 2 chipped bowls. It was stew, thick and brown and promising warmth. He didn't ask her to sit, just placed one bowl at the opposite end of the table and sat himself, facing the window. Clara eyed the bowl like it might vanish if she blinked. Hunger had long become background noise in her body, but the smell called to something deep. She stepped slowly, limped, pulled the chair out, and sat. The seat creaked beneath her. Neither of them spoke for a few minutes. They just ate. The silence wasn't awkward. It felt like something established, agreed upon without words. When her spoon scraped the bottom of the bowl, Wade finally spoke. "You remember anything after the station?" She looked at him. "Bits, not much. You said your name was Clara." "Still is." A flicker of something near his mouth, amusement maybe, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You ran from someone?" She didn't answer immediately. He didn't press. "My husband," she said at last. "Or the man who pretended to be." Wade nodded, like he'd expected as much. "He owed some men. Sold me to settle his debt. Thought I wouldn't fight it." She paused. He thought wrong. Wade didn't ask for details. Just nodded again and pushed his empty bowl aside. Clara leaned back, the movement slow and painful. She winced. "You always bring strange women back from the train station?" "No," Wade said. "Only the ones who collapse." She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Lucky me." Outside, the wind picked up. It rattled the window panes. Somewhere in the distance, a raven called. Clara looked around again, slower this time. Every item in the cabin had its place. There was no mess, no signs of chaos or clutter. A life lived in routine. Simple, solitary. Who was she? Clara asked, eyes scanning the room again. Wade didn't pretend not to understand. "My wife," he said, "Catherine, died 4 winters back." "How?" He took his time answering. "Sick, got it in her lungs. Doctor said she might pull through. She didn't." Clara nodded, not out of sympathy but recognition. Death wasn't a stranger to her either. "She leave this place to you?" "No," he said. "We built it together." That surprised her. She looked again. The shelves had been hammered by hand, the walls insulated with sewn wool, the fireplace built with care. "It's quiet here," she said. "Sometimes too quiet." The clock on the mantel ticked steadily. The fire popped, sending sparks up the flue. "You plan on staying long?" Wade asked, not accusing, just curious. "I don't know." Clara's fingers tightened around her spoon. "I don't have a plan. Just left, that was the plan." He nodded, absorbing her answer. She looked at him then, really looked. His hands were calloused, not just from work, but old burns maybe. From war, maybe from fire. His forearms bore scars. His face was weathered, not ugly, but lived in. His eyes watched everything, but didn't judge. "You were a lawman once, weren't you?" She asked. He raised an eyebrow. "I can tell," she said. "You carry yourself like you're still waiting for someone to pull a gun." Wade didn't smile, but there was a shift in his expression. Not surprised, not annoyed. "Sheriff," he said, "years ago, long before I knew better. What happened?" He didn't answer, just said, "Eventually, the job teaches you what not to fix." Clara exhaled. Sounds familiar. He stood then and collected the bowls without a word. Rinsed them in the basin, dried them, stacked them neatly. When he finished, he grabbed his coat from the wall. "I'm going to check the fence line." "You'll be safe here?" She hesitated. "You sure?" "If someone followed you, they won't reach us tonight. And if they do, I've seen worse." He stepped out, the door creaking open and slamming shut behind him. Cold rushed in briefly, then was gone. Clara sat there alone. The silence came back, thicker now, not threatening but thoughtful. The fire whispered, the clock ticked, and outside the wind swept through trees that had stood longer than any memory. She got up, pain still clinging to her joints like vines, and wandered the cabin. She touched the corner of the mantel where initials were carved C and W. Her fingers traced the groove. In a small box on a side table, she found letters tied in. Faded ribbon. She didn't open them. She knew grief when she saw it. Back at the couch, she lowered herself slowly and sat in the warmth. She wanted to leave. She didn't want to stay. But more than that, she didn't want to be alone tonight. Wade returned before the sky turned fully black. His coat carried the scent of smoke and frost. He nodded once to her and set his rifle near the door. Then he pulled up the second chair, near the fire, and sat. Neither of them spoke. She watched the fire. He watched the dark through the window. A log popped, and the silence shifted again. Less like strangers, more like two people too tired to pretend. She looked over at him. "If I stay," she said softly, "you might regret it." Wade didn't look away from the window. "That's my choice to make." She closed her eyes. Somewhere in her chest, something loosened, and for the first time in years, she slept without dreaming. The days passed like smoke, curling from a chimney quiet, curling upward, vanishing into something you couldn't name. Clara began to move easier, walking with less pain, her bruises fading from purple to yellow to memory. She took to small tasks around the cabin, sweeping dust from corners, folding the blankets Wade never bothered with, washing tin plates in the basin after meals. He didn't ask her to. He didn't stop her either. They fell into a rhythm not unlike two people who'd been living beside one another for years. Comfortable, steady, yet under the surface, something shifted. Clara noticed the way Wade's eyes lingered at the horizon. When the wind changed, how he paused before reaching for his rifle, like muscle memory had met new caution. He said little, but she saw more in his silences now. The way he stacked firewood higher than needed. The way he listened at night, when coyotes howled, his head cocked, hand on the revolver at his side, that it wasn't peace they'd found. Not really. It was a fragile pause in the middle of something coming. On the 7th morning since she arrived, Wade saddled up to ride into town for supplies. Clara stood on the porch in Wade's old coat, holding a mug of weak coffee. Her eyes tracked his movements. He adjusted his saddle with calm precision, but his jaw was clenched. "You sure you should go alone?" she asked. "I've got to pick up your medicine," he said without looking at her. "And bullets." He didn't say more. He didn't have to. She nodded. "I'll keep the door locked." His horse trotted off into the trees, leaving her behind in the hush of an overcast morning. She cleaned the cabin again, unable to sit still. She scrubbed until her knuckles ached and her legs begged her to stop. Then she took Wade's revolver from the drawer and held it in both hands, feeling its weight. Cold, real. She hadn't touched a gun since escaping that wagon weeks ago. That night haunted her, the way the outlaws laughed when they tied her hands, the glint of silver when they tossed coins to decide who got her first. She sat on the floor and forced herself to breathe through the memory. When Wade returned, dusk had begun bleeding across the sky. He entered with a scowl. Clara looked up from the table. What happened? He placed the bag of supplies on the counter harder than necessary. His boots tracked in dried mud. They're in town, he said. Clara's stomach turned. 3 men. Asking questions. Described you right down to the bruises. Her mouth went dry. Wade looked at her then. One of them has a scar across his nose? She nodded. That's Eli, the worst of them. He turned away, jaw tight. They said they're headed out east in a day or 2. Could just be talk. It's not. He paused, then asked what she already feared. Do you want to run? Clara shook her head. I did enough running. I won't live scared anymore. Wade met her eyes, and she saw the flicker of something in him, approval, maybe, or admiration. Whatever it was, it hardened his decision. Then we prepare. The next morning, Wade handed her the revolver. You need to learn how to use this. Properly, he said. I already know. He raised an eyebrow. Clara tightened her grip and aimed at a can on a fence post. The shot rang out clean. The can flew backward, and a flock of birds exploded from the trees in protest. Wade grinned. That'll do. They spent the next 2 days like shadows sharpening their edges. Wade set traps along the trail that led to the cabin. He fixed the fence, secured the barn doors, checked his rifle with careful hands. Clara followed, observing, absorbing. They didn't speak much, but the silence between them shifted again. It no longer held hesitation. It held understanding. On the 3rd evening, they sat on the porch with rifles across their laps. The sky was bruised with storm clouds, not just the ones above them, but the ones they both felt building in there. Bones, you miss her? Clara asked, not looking at him. Every day, Wade replied, without hesitation. She'd like what you're doing now, helping me. Wade stared at the darkening tree line. I don't know. She was the gentle kind. You? You've got fight in you, Clara smirked. I had to. He glanced at her. Do you think you'll stay? After? Clara didn't answer. She didn't know. That night, thunder cracked just past midnight. Not the kind that rolled. The kind that split the sky in 2. Wade shot upright in his bedroll beside the fireplace. Clara was already awake, sitting on the edge of the couch. That wasn't thunder, she said. They grabbed their weapons and moved to the window. In the far distance, just beyond the creek. A faint orange glow bloomed against the black trees. Campfire. Wade muttered. Too close. He nodded. Too late to leave now. The next morning brought tension as tight as a pulled wire. The sun never broke the clouds. It stayed gray, heavy, watching. Wade prepared coffee. Clara checked the rifle again. It felt strange how calm her hands were. Just after noon, hooves thundered over the rise. 3 riders. Clara didn't breathe. They didn't wear masks. They didn't need to. Men like that didn't hide their faces. Eli rode in front, scar-catching. The light. The other 2 were grinning, like it was all a game. Wade stepped out first. Clara followed. Well now, Eli drawled. Ain't this cozy? You're trespassing, Wade said. Eli looked around. I'd say we're just visiting. Came looking for something that belongs to us. Clara stepped forward. I belong to no one. Eli's grin widened. Didn't say it was you, sweetheart. Could be the horse. Could be the coat. Wade raised his rifle slightly. Not aimed. Not yet. You've got no claim here, Wade said. One of the men spat on the ground. We paid good money for her. You paid a dead man's promise, Clara snapped. You'll leave with nothing. The tension snapped like a dry twig. Eli drew first. Wade was faster. The first shot dropped the man beside Eli. A second shot clipped Eli's arm, spinning him off his horse. Clara fired at the third, missing but close enough to send him fleeing. Wade moved without hesitation, advancing down the slope. Eli scrambled backward, reaching for a hidden blade. Clara's voice rang out sharp. "Don't!" Eli froze. Blood poured from his arm, dark and fast. He looked up at Wade, at Clara, and smiled through his teeth. "She's not worth it." "She's not yours to judge," Wade replied. And then, quietly, "Run?" Eli crawled to his horse and mounted with difficulty, retreating into the trees. Turned back toward the cabin, blood spatter on his shirt, sweat beading on his forehead. Clara's hands shook, not with fear, but with something deeper. Release. She'd stood her ground. Chased away her ghosts. Inside, Wade poured water from the kettle and sat at the table like it was any other day. Clara didn't move to sit. She stood in the doorway, staring at the place where her past had ridden in and then turned away. When she finally turned back to him, her voice was soft but steady. "I think I want to stay." Wade didn't smile. He just nodded once. "I'll build you a room." She blinked. "You can't sleep on the couch forever," he said. "It creaks too loud." She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Outside, the sky cleared, just a little. Enough for one thin shaft of light to break through the clouds and land across the porch, where two rifles leaned side by side. And for now, that was enough. The morning after the shootout came soft and silver, a breath held between storms. Dew glistened on the porch railings, and the air smelled of pine and cooled gunpowder. Clara stood barefoot on the steps, coffee cupped in her palms, watching. Mist rolled over the hills. Her ribs ached, her shoulders were stiff, but for once her bruises didn't feel like chains. They felt like evidence. She'd fought and lived. Inside, Wade moved with his usual economy, quiet footsteps, steady hands. He didn't speak until she came back inside, brushing the cold from her skin. "You didn't sleep," he said. She shook her head, setting the cup down. "Didn't want to close my eyes and wake up back in that wagon." "You won't," he said simply. She looked at him. He'd cleaned up, shaved the stubble from his chin, and stitched the tear in his shirt from where a bullet had grazed him. The man who'd pulled her from the train station was quiet, wary. This one stood straighter. His eyes still held shadows, but now they had light behind them too. They moved through the day like people learning to breathe again. Wade chopped wood with the sharp rhythm of someone settling nerves. Clara repaired a frayed saddlebag, fingers, working slowly over the torn leather. She sang under her breath, nothing anyone would recognize, just something from a long time ago, when her mother still braided her hair and told her stories about women with fire in their veins. That evening, she cooked stew. It wasn't perfect. The potatoes burned on one side, and the beans were underdone, but Wade ate every bite and said nothing, which she took as the highest compliment. Afterward, they sat on the porch again, watching dusk stretch itself across the land. Wade smoked a thin roll of tobacco. Clara watched the sky, her legs tucked beneath her. "This land," she said finally, "feels like it remembers everything." Wade took a drag. "It does. How do you live with that?" "You don't. You just make sure it remembers you right." She thought about that. Then she said, "I used to dream of a place like this. Not exactly. Not the blood or the fear or the fire, but the quiet, the steadiness. A porch like this. A wind that didn't chase you." Wade looked over at her, smoke curling from his lips. "Why didn't you ever find it?" "I was looking at all the wrong men," she said. "And all the wrong places." He nodded. That's where most of us get lost. The next morning, Clara asked if she could ride. Out to the ridge. Wade hesitated. It's a long ride. I know. You want me to come? No, I want to go alone. He didn't argue. He saddled the horse for her, adjusted the stirrups, handed her a canteen. She rode off into the rising sun, and for the first time in a long time, the wind didn't feel like it was pushing her. Away, it felt like it was lifting her. The trail was narrow and winding. Birds called overhead, their cries sharp and lonely. She passed a stream, a grove of crooked trees, a deer that darted into the brush before she could blink. A ridge waited above it all, steep and broad and high enough to see half the world. When she reached it, she dismounted and sat on a boulder. The air up there was thin and clean. Below her, the land stretched wild and endless forests, streams, scattered ranches, shadows of towns. Somewhere down there were the men who had tried to own her, and somewhere else was the man who had carried her instead. She pulled a small bundle from her coat pocket, an old ribbon, frayed and faded, the last thing she'd kept from her mother. She tied it to a tree branch and let the wind take it. A part of her, gone now, but free. That night, she returned to find the cabin lit with lanterns, and Wade sitting at the table, carving something into a piece of wood. "What is that?" she asked. He turned it toward her. It was rough but unmistakable, a bird in flight. "For the porch," he said, "over the door." She stared at it. "You made that for me?" He shrugged. "It's your home too, isn't it?" The word struck her like a bell inside her chest. Home. It had never been a word that felt real. Not in the shack she grew up in. Not in the house where her first husband taught her fear. Not in the wagon where Eli had threatened to carve his name into her skin. But now it fit. She stepped forward, took the carving from his hands, and set it on the table gently. "I want to build something here," she said. Wade looked at her, waiting, not just stay. Build. A garden, maybe chickens. A second room. A life. He nodded slowly. "I'll help." Clara smiled. It wasn't big or bright. Just steady. They started the next day. Wade cut timber. Clara dug in the soil. They argued over where the fence should go. She won. He didn't mind. They talked more now, not just about chores or weather, but memories. Wade told her about Catherine, about how he'd met her in a flooded river crossing and carried her across, half drowned and laughing. Clara told him about her mother's stories, about the way she'd taught her to braid her hair and read clouds like they were maps. Each night they sat on the porch, sometimes in silence, sometimes with stories, always with something between them that wasn't romance, not yet, but something stronger. Respect, safety, a strange, gentle joy. One evening, a letter arrived. The mail wagon came once a month. Wade brought it in with the rest of the supplies and handed it to Clara without a word. It was from a sheriff in a nearby county. Eli had been found. He wouldn't be bothering anyone again. She read it twice. Then she burned it in the fire. Wade watched the paper curl into ash. "You all right?" She nodded. "I don't need proof anymore. I already know I'm free." That night, she asked if she could sleep in the second room they'd started building. The walls weren't up yet, just the frame. But she wanted to sleep under the stars, surrounded by the bones of her future. He helped her lay a blanket down, lit a lantern, kissed her cheek once, just above the jaw, where no bruise had ever reached. Then he left her there. Clara lay in the half-finished room, eyes on the sky, hands on her chest, feeling her heartbeat like it belonged to someone alive. Morning came with the smell of rain. She woke to Wade hammering the first wall into place. His shirt was off. His back glistened with sweat. She stood, crossed the threshold, picked up a hammer, and began working beside him. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. It wasn't about what had come before, that it was about what they were building now. The house grew. So did the garden. So did she. One day, a traveler passed through. A woman, lost and alone, with a cut on her hand and a story in her eyes. Clara cleaned her wound, fed her stew, and let her rest on the couch. Before the woman left, she asked how Clara had found this place. Clara smiled. I didn't, she said. It found me. The woman asked if she'd ever leave. Clara looked out at the trees, the fence, the wind. Not unless it asks me to. As the woman rode away, Wade came. To stand beside her. He didn't ask who she was. Just handed Clara a hammer. Ready to finish that roof? He asked. She took it. They walked back toward the home they were still making. Step by step, piece by piece. She wasn't healed. Not entirely. But she was building something stronger than scars. And for the first time in her life, Clara knew the truth of it. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. She smiled, her hands full of splinters and sky.